Welcome you to this course, Introduction to English Methods. This course will introduce you to the nitty-gritty of the preparations towards becoming an effective teacher of English language in Nigeria. For example, as a prospective teacher, you need to have an understanding of the historical development of English language in Nigeria, the linguistic milieu of your students, the importance of English language, that is, the functions of English language in Nigeria. You also need to know about the phenomenon of interference as it hinders the teaching and learning of English language in Nigeria. The knowledge of these will enable you to choose the right methods and techniques of teaching English as a second language in Nigeria. I believe it will be an exciting and rewarding learning experience. I am your facilitator, Professor Folusho Okebukola. Introduction to English Language Methods, Class 101. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the historical development of English language in Nigeria, list the functions of English language, and explain interference as a hindrance to the teaching of English language in Nigeria. Historical development of English language in Nigeria. English was introduced in Nigeria as far back as the 16th century by the British pepper traders. It was later enhanced by the British missionaries, slave traders, the colonial masters, and of course, after independence, the government continued with the use of English in Nigeria. It is important to note that English language has been with us in Nigeria for a long time. We are talking about the 16th century. The missionaries who offered to teach English to the nationals started arriving in Nigeria in 1842. You can agree with me that that is a long time. So it is not surprising that English language has come to stay in Nigeria. The missionaries taught English language to facilitate communication because, of course, English language was the most convenient way for them to communicate, being their own native language. Apart from this, even Nigerians themselves demanded the medium of English. They wanted to learn English language because to them it was a way of identifying with the white man's culture. Apart from this, English language, being an international language, was the language of commerce, civilization, and Christianity. So, it performed important functions in these areas to the extent that the knowledge of it became necessary for anyone who wanted to secure employment, not only in Nigeria but also in the west coast, the coast of West Africa. Thus, English language became our second language because apart from the indigenous languages, it was widely used. And it became even more important than the indigenous languages as a result of these functions that we have discussed. What then is the importance of English language in Nigeria? Of course, you and I know that it is our official language because we have not been able to choose among our indigenous languages. We have not been able to decide which of them we will have as our lingua franca. Thus, English language has remained our official language that binds us together as Nigerians politically, linguistically, and culturally. It is the language that every Nigerian, regardless of the ethnic affiliation, is able to speak, especially those who are literate, those who have gone to school. Apart from being our official language, it is also the medium of instruction in our schools. As stated in the National Policy on Education, from the upper basic level, English language is the medium of instruction, the medium of teaching all the subjects up to the tertiary level. It should also be noted that as the official language, English is used in all our government reports. That is, all reports are written in English. The white papers, government orders, and everything that keeps us informed as Nigerian citizens about what happens across the country are all written in English language. Also, as a compulsory subject in our schools, all students know or should know that a credit pass in English language determines admission into higher institutions. Even if you are going into the university, the polytechnic, to study even the indigenous languages, a credit pass in English is compulsory. This underscores the importance of English language in Nigeria. So, as a teacher of English language, you have an understanding of why students should not only pass the subject, they should also be competent. They should also have some communicative competence in the use of the language. The teaching and learning of English language in Nigeria, as discussed so far, is not without its problems. In this course, we shall be deliberating, we shall be discussing some of these problems. But in this lesson, we shall be looking at the phenomenon of interference. What do we mean by interference? Interference refers to the practice of transferring elements from one language to another. This means that a speaker of a language would normally or transfer some features belonging to one language to another in the process of speaking or writing. This is because the speaker has come to use or speak both languages. Therefore, the tendency of transferring the features of one to another becomes a possibility. When this happens at the level of phonology, that is the phonological level, we often refer to this as accent. For instance, it is not uncommon to hear some Hausa learners of English language, that is, those who have Hausa language as their first language or native language. In the learning of English, you hear some pronounce P as, instead of saying PDP, you might have heard some Hausa people say FDF. You might have also heard some Igbo speakers or Igbo learners of English language talk of something like oil instead of oil. The same thing with Yoruba learners of English. Sometimes a Yoruba person or somebody who has Yoruba as his mother tongue or native language, we talk of native language, indigenous language, first language, mother tongue. All of these terminologies are used to describe the first language, the language that the speaker speaks at home. The Yoruba speaker learning English can say something like children rather than children, or soil. There is a joke, son of the soil, instead of soil. All this happens because the speakers transfer some consonant or vowel sounds that are not in their native language but found in English. The tendency is now to transfer these sounds to the new language, the L2, second language, which is English in this instance. Interference at grammatical and lexical levels are known as dialects. For example, we have standard Yoruba, which is learned in schools. We also have some dialects of Yoruba, like Ijesha. We also have, as an element in the interference phenomenon, the issue of borrowing. What is borrowing? Borrowing refers to lexical items. It involves borrowing lexical items from one language to another when a person is bilingual or multilingual. There are some English words which have been borrowed from other language. For instance, French. There are some words of French origin which have found their way into English language. Words like restaurant. Restaurant is a French word, but in English, sometimes you hear restaurant. People talk of restaurant. The word is actually restaurant. The coming into English language has rendered it as restaurant, as people call it. Also, there are other words like call, louver, vis-a-vis, and so on. There are so many of these words. I will leave you to work on them, find out some other examples in your own or during your own private study. It is not only in French that you have borrowing into English. We also have some words that are of Latin origin. A word like anonymous, for instance, is from Latin. A word like bona fide, or words like etc., ego, many of them also that you can talk about. In Yoruba language, we talk about tabili, which is a word that has been borrowed from the English word table. We also have switches. Switches occur at the lexical level within a sentence. What are switches? A switch is a function or a situation whereby a language, for instance, English language or Yoruba language, is mixed, or the two languages are mixed together, are mixed in speech. When this occurs within a sentence, that is, when you switch to another language within a sentence at the lexical level, that is intrasentential. Intrasentential in the sense that it is coming in between a sentence, intra. When this happens, it is known as code mixing. That is, you are mixing the code in one language with the other. Let's look at an example. If I say, for instance, by the way, I am bilingual, I'm a Yoruba speaker, and I'm learning English. And I say a thing like, I went alone. Shey, you understand? You can identify, if you are a Yoruba person, you'll be able to identify the Yoruba word in that sentence. Shey. I went alone. Shey, you understand? This has occurred at the lexical level, and usually it involves a single word from the other language. On the other hand, switches can also occur at the level of phrases or sentences. Don't forget, code mixing, intrasentential, happens within the sentence, inside, within. But The other one, intrasentential, occurs at the end of the sentence. When it happens like this, it is known as code switching. The first one is code mixing. This one is code switching. Let's look at an example. I was going on the highway. Suddenly, I just noticed a taxi. Ó kàn sáré gba iwájú mi ni. In this case, you will notice that I have switched from English language to Yoruba language. Sometimes, or most of the time, this happens unconsciously. So, what have we learned in this lesson? We have learned that English language has been with us from time immemorial. It was introduced by the British pepper traders as far back as the 16th century. I wonder how many of us can even talk about our generation in the 16th century. We also learned that it was later enhanced by the missionaries. We still have the influence of the missionaries all around us. We have Christianity and the different denominations. And of course, we are aware that English language is dominant even in this in the Christian practice. We also learned that the need to bridge the linguistic, ethnic, and the cultural gaps among the different communities, the different linguistic societies, resulted in the adoption of English language as a medium of communication. Also, the relevance of English language in the school system is well established. It is the medium of communication at almost all levels. The use of English language also provides us with some linguistic empowerment, because it is not only used in the classroom, it is our official language. Of course, we have learned that the teaching and learning of English in Nigeria is hampered by the phenomenon of interference. At all levels. In our next lesson, we shall be looking at multilingualism and bilingualism. We shall be dwelling on these two concepts in details, and in subsequent lessons also we shall be looking at this phenomenon of interference as it affects the teaching and learning of English at the phonological level, syntactic level, semantic level, morphological level, in fact, at all levels of English language teaching. In conclusion, it is important that the challenge of interference that we have discussed to a certain extent in this lesson should be contextualized within multilingualism. And as I said, we shall dwell more on this in the next lesson. I believe this lesson has equipped you, my students, the prospective teacher of English language, with the requisite knowledge that you will need to help your students, the learners, to diagnose, correct, and prevent learning difficulties before they escalate to a drop in their performance in English language.